Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Medical and Health Education, and today we're going to be covering the Unit 1 of our PG certificate, which is the Reflective Educator. I'm just going to give everyone a couple of minutes just to get settled in, and then obviously we'll begin today's session. Just for anybody who is watching the webinar back, please do still email any questions you may have regarding the course. As you can see, we've got the email address on the slide there, so studyonline@manchester.ac.uk. So as I said, if you're watching back, please do send through any questions which you might have once we've gone through the event today. Okay, great. So here's just a very brief agenda for our viewers. We'll just start with an introduction from myself. I'll cover why study at Manchester, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Fiona, one of the course leaders for the programme, and she'll talk through the Reflective Educator and also give you an overview as well of the PG certificates and the units involved. Okay, so to start with, why Manchester? So as you can see, we're a leading research intensive university with 83% of our research which is ranked as world leading or internationally excellent. We're always very high up as well in the rankings list for top best universities. So as it stands for 2021, we're 5th best university in the UK, and we're 23rd best university in the world, which is fantastic. Obviously, with the situation with the pandemic's changed a lot of the ways that we're learning at the moment, and the university has put in a multi-million-pound investment in flexible and blended learning. This is happening for our courses, but also for we've put a lot of money for our online and blended courses as well. And because of the sort of credibility of the university and the flexibility around learning now, we have a global network of over 500,000 alumni based in more than 190 countries. So again, studying with us, not only is it a fantastic university that you'll be joining, but it's also a fantastic opportunity for networking as well with your course peers. Again, we understand that online learning is quite a new concept to a lot of people. You sometimes associate online learning as sat at your computer on your own, studying with no interaction. That's certainly not the case with the PG certificate in medical and health education. The course really is built around flexibility. It allows you to plan and learn at a time that suits you. There is no such thing either as a typical online learner. Our students are from all different backgrounds depending on the course. Most students that we do have with us are working professionals though, so the flexibility of the online course is extremely important to them. But as I said, study online does not mean that you're studying alone. Studying with us means you'll have lots of interaction, as I said earlier, with your course peers. You can arrange one-to-one consultations with the course academics as well. So even though you're studying online, you've definitely got a great support network behind you, and you by all means are definitely not studying alone. So just looking at the PG certificate, what really sets the University of Manchester apart? Well, the course was created in collaboration with the Royal College of Physicians of Edinburgh. It's also accredited by the Academy of Medical Educators, both fantastic partnerships for us to have. And the course content is directly related to clinical and healthcare teaching and assessments, with a real life focus on real life scenarios and topical issues. So this isn't a course that you'll do and the information you'll learn is going to end up being quite irrelevant. This is very much designed to help you in your day-to-day job, and as I said, it's all based on those real life scenarios that will be applicable to you moving forwards. And our flexible online learning approach is suitable, as I said earlier, for a diverse group of learners. We completely understand that going back and studying a course online can be daunting, which is why I said we are here to support you with that. So you'll have lots of support at the University of Manchester to help you through. As I said, I know we're not really here to listen to me talk today. We are here to listen to my colleague Fiona. So I'll hand over now and allow her to just introduce herself.
Thanks very much, Lisa. So, hi, my name's Fiona. I'm the joint unit lead for this course unit entitled The Reflective Educator. And just to give you a little bit of my background, we're quite a diverse bunch that teach on this PG Cert. My first degree was a Bachelor of Arts in Modern Languages, actually. I come from that background, French and Russian. But then I went on, after a number of years, to find my way into the career of speech and language therapy. So that's my healthcare background. I'm a qualified, experienced speech and language therapist, still registered, practicing as a consultant, and I have an MPhil, and I'm registered with the professional bodies, like a lot of us are, relevant to our professions. At the University of Manchester, I'm a clinical reader in speech and language therapy education. My focus has always been around teaching. I'm a director of undergraduate education for our department or division. And I'm also a principal fellow of the Higher Education Academy. It's actually changed its name in recent times to Advance HE. That's something I'm very proud of, because I was awarded that. It's the highest level of fellowship you can get on the grounds of my accomplishments as a healthcare educator. So I'd never contemplated that that was going to be the way my career was going to go. I thought I'd stay in the NHS forevermore. But you know, more and more, even research-led universities like our own are taking teaching and learning extremely seriously, and there are great opportunities for us as educators. So as you may have gathered already, I'm quite a champion. I really pride myself on supporting others, perhaps in a way that I wasn't supported when I set out, and I really want to be part of transforming the workplace for those of us who are interested in education. So I'm always signposting colleagues both in the NHS and within the university and other higher education institutions to go for it in terms of their teaching careers. Next slide, please, Lisa. So entry requirements for the degree it's a postgrad qualification, so you need a first degree, and for many of you that will be in your profession. Like I did speech language therapy, you may be a doctor or a social worker or a nurse, so a primary degree in that registered healthcare profession. Or if you come from a science background perhaps, or a related subject, we require at least a 2-1 level or equivalent qualification as an entry requirement. If English isn't your first language and you don't hold a valid English language test report, we do require that you complete either the IELTS or the TOEFL. I used to teach English as a foreign language in a former life, but you'll be very familiar with that if you're one of our international applicants. Thank you. Next slide, Lisa. So who's it for? Anybody, basically, who's interested in their role as an educator within healthcare or medical education. So for many of you will be clinicians, doctors, nurses, midwives, dentists, pharmacists, clinical psychologists. It's not an exhaustive list because there's so many different professions, or like myself, an allied healthcare profession, and there are just a few. I think the HCPC registered about 17 of them now. Or you may be from a clinical science background, so more industry or lab-based work. Thank you. Next slide. So the course, when we say the course, the PG Cert, the programme, the PG Cert, if you're going to go for that, is made up of 3 20-credit units, but of course each unit stands alone, so you can take just one of them or 2 of them as CPD, continuing professional development, just as a one-off, or you might want to bag one unit and come back and do another one and build it up over a period of time. So you can join the course with any unit. There are intake dates around February, September and November, so don't think that if you've missed the boat if you don't start at the beginning of a traditional academic year. You have up to 3 years to complete the PG Cert, but you can complete it in less time. I think the minimum you can complete it in is around 12 months. So we try to be as flexible as we can, bearing in mind that our target audience are busy people in full-time jobs, working all sorts of strange shift patterns very often, and international different international times zones as well. So we try and maintain that flexibility. Next slide. So I think this is looking at the team. This is the team just for this course unit, the Reflective Educator. And I wanted just to show you our mugshots because we're quite a diverse bunch in terms of our backgrounds, and I think that really adds to the quality of the degree programme. You already know about me. Then there's Bip Chowdhury, who's a medic. She's a trained doctor. There's Diane Burns, who's from a nursing background, and Pat Cartney, who's a social worker. So you see, we're very proud of that diversity within the teaching team. So even if we don't cover every single profession going, we're very aware and we keep each other in check when it perhaps gets a bit too focused on one profession, you know, so that it's accessible and of interest to everybody, regardless of your discipline background. Next slide, please. So homing in a bit more on this specific unit, the Reflective Educator, you'd be studying the theory that underpins effective practice in teaching, learning and assessment and evaluation. So the whole remit of what's involved in healthcare education. Each of our units has 4 elements. With this course unit, the elements are, the first one, your identity as educator. The second one, looking at the context for you and your learners. Element 3 is the underpinning teaching and learning theory. And element 4, looking at reflective practice as an educator. So we'll look at each of those elements in turn in a minute. And the assessment for the whole course unit is for you to produce an academic blog. So it's a written assignment that you submit online, but it's rather than a traditional essay, it seems more appropriate to align it to what we're asking you to learn, to make that assessment in the form of an academic blog, not blob. And we've had some fabulous work produced in the past by previous students, really, really interesting stuff. Next slide, please. So looking at the elements in turn, the first one is getting you to stop and think about your identity as an educator. Just getting you to think of yourself as an educator. You may already be there, but many of you, and I count myself in this, I was a clinician first and foremost. I was a speech and language therapist, healthcare professional. I'd never really stopped to think of myself as an educator, and that's what we begin by asking you to do. And some of you, it's quite a struggle because your identity is very wrapped up in your discipline. But we want you to begin to think, oh gosh, yes, I can also wear this hat, which is as an educator in my discipline. And to get you to appreciate, if you haven't begun to discover this already, that there is actually a whole body of literature in teaching and learning in healthcare. So again, we're often very engrossed in the literature and maybe contributing to the literature in our healthcare discipline, but not have stopped to think that there's actually some really interesting literature and evidence base around healthcare medical education. We then stop and think about reflective practice and acknowledge that that it's a bit tricky for some of us. Some of us are a bit resistant to reflective practice in our disciplines, but that we need to really be reflective practitioners in our teaching practice too. And then we're encouraging you to take your first steps towards becoming a reflective educator. So that's all in the first element. And then we move on to the second element. Next slide, please. Element 2, which we've entitled Context for You and Your Learners. And this is about, we ask you all manner of questions, all those on that signpost there, about your particular context for teaching and what that looks like, because it's quite different for different educators. It may be in a classroom setting, but more likely it's going to be at the bedside in a hospital or in a laboratory, or supporting student learners in people's homes around home visits, or much more informal settings. So we really want to stop and think about where exactly you're doing your educating, and what that looks like and what the different challenges and barriers are, because it's not easy goodness, it was never easy in healthcare, but during and post-COVID, there are so many pressing priorities on your time. To incorporate education of a high quality is really, really difficult. Knowing your learners, I think we can just assume and take for granted that learners are just like us, whatever that is. I hear so many anecdotes about, oh yes, I remember when I was an undergrad, I liked it this way. And if you have to stop and think, well, maybe you weren't a typical undergrad, maybe you were different, and think about the different motivators of our diverse student body, ensuring that learning is accessible to all. What makes us decide what it is that we teach? Do we just make it up as we go along? Or is there a clear curriculum? Do you get to decide? Have you got autonomy, or are you answerable to different stakeholders? And how on earth do you know whether learning has actually taken place? I think we can teach and teach and teach and just assume that it's been absorbed like a sponge, but how, particularly in those busy clinical contexts, how are we checking that learning has actually happened? Thank you. Next slide, please, Lisa. So the third of the 4 elements is underpinning teaching and learning theory. And perhaps like me, when I set out beginning to think about this, you haven't appreciated yet that there is a whole body of literature. Theories about how adults learn, you know, that there is a certain way that adults learn that's perhaps different to the way that children learn, that there's literature and journals within education, but particularly in your own discipline, there's a whole host of journals in medical education, nursing education. There are not very many in speech and language therapy education. It's such a tiny discipline. We tend to borrow from the other disciplines. And how to think about applying that theory to your practice in teaching and learning. What implications this literature, this body of literature has for your own practice day to day. Next slide. So finally, the 4th element we entitled reflective practice. So it's bringing it all together and thinking, okay, having completed the first 3 elements, how am I going to move forward in terms of being a reflective practitioner, taking from the teaching and learning literature what's relevant, applying it to my practice to move forward and address some of the perhaps mistakes I've been making, the naive assumptions I've been making, to go ahead and improve my practice. And there may be useful models of reflective practice to help you here, tools that will help you to be a better, more reflective practitioner. Next slide. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the Reflective Educator course unit. But if you were thinking of doing the whole PG Cert, you'll see that model is the same in each course unit, the 4 elements, with each element running over a couple of weeks. So you complete each element in turn, and we support you to do bits and pieces of formative assessment that you get feedback on from your peers, so that you, bit by bit, if you engage with all the learning activities, you're pretty much there by the end in terms of completing your summative assessment to submit right at the end. So now's the time for you to raise any questions that you have. I don't know if there are already any questions coming in, Lisa.
We have, Fiona, yes. Thank you so much for taking us through the first unit of the PG certificate. That was very interesting. And I just want to mention as well quickly that when we obviously saw the team unit, Diane Burns, who's the academic lead for the PG certificate, actually was involved in putting together an insight video. It's a very short, informative section of information all about the PG certificate with us, which is fantastic. So what I'll actually do is make sure that that's emailed out as well to any students who'd like to watch that. I said it's just a really informative video. It's about 3 minutes long. It just gives you a good insight into the course as well. So I'll make sure that's circulated. I just thought of that when I saw Diane's face. Diane and Biff both feature on that. In regards to questions, we have had a couple come through already. It's ones I'm sure, Fiona, that you've come across before, but I know you sort of touched on this earlier as well in regards to timescales. But we've had one student's just asked, you've said we have up to 3 years to complete the course. Can you complete it any sooner?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we like to stress that you can take up to 36 months, 3 years to complete, just so that people don't panic that they might not get it done in time. But I think sometimes that gives the impression that that it takes that long. No, you can complete it in a year if you go flat out and do one unit after another, or 3 units one by one.
So as we said, it's not, you don't have to do it for 3 months. It can easily be completed within the 12 months. Again, it's that flexibility, isn't it, for the students, depending on, what their workload's like and the time they have to dedicate. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. And people can start off thinking they'll complete it in 12 months, and then things get in the way, like global pandemics, and suddenly you have a shift of priorities. So we appreciate that, and we're very flexible.
We've just had another question again. It sort of links to the flexibility. Obviously, it's been a very difficult year, and obviously people's workloads are changing on a day-to-day basis. So someone's just asked if they can't start in September this year, will they have to wait until September 2022 to join us?
No, not at all. There are different intake points: September, February, and Lisa, can you?
November.
And November, yeah. September, November, and February, and that's the point at which a new course unit begins. So if you start in September, you'd be starting with this course unit, Reflective Educator, but that course unit doesn't run until later. But there are other course units that start at different times.
I think that again makes the course quite unique, doesn't it? Because you have got that flexibility. I know with even some of our other courses that I work on, you don't have that flexibility to join any module. It's a bit more structured, whereas it's fantastic that, I know I've spoken to some students before who've said, I'm really interested in joining in September, but just because of my workload, the way this year sort of panned out already, it's just not going to plan at all. So it's great to know that, don't worry about it. If you can't make September start date, then we do have, as I said, another start date in November.
And we've numbered the course units 1, 2, and 3. That's kind of shorthand, really. And I suppose, I don't know, would it be ideal to start with this course unit? Maybe, but we are very mindful that somebody may be starting with Unit 2 or Unit 3, and it works that way. It's not that this unit is a prerequisite for the following unit at all.
Fiona, I've just had another question as well come through, just regards to if from someone who said, I'm keen to start in September, how does it work with lecturers? So I think probably his question is in relation to the actual online learning environment. So if you couldn't make the lecture.
Yeah, I think maybe you're assuming that there are scheduled live sessions that you'd have to attend. This program is entirely online, so you do it in your own time. You can do it at 3 o'clock in the morning if you want. It's entirely up to you. The only live session that we have every week, and currently that's on a Friday afternoon, is a weekly tutorial, which lasts about an hour, but that's always recorded. And it's a bit frustrating if you're working on a Friday afternoon and you can't attend, and you'd like to attend and participate. But the feedback we've had from previous students is they love it, the fact that it's recorded, because even if they can't be there in person, they enjoy it. It's a kind of making contact, and then as Lisa said by way of an introduction, it's very, very interactive, participative. There's discussion boards. So although you may be doing your learning, your studying in the middle of the night, there'll be somebody the next day who responds to your discussion points. And the feedback we've had certainly is that if you're actively involved and engaged with the programme, you very much feel part of a community, and that's what we want to foster, so that we become this community of practice. Because as educators ourselves on this programme, we learn as much from you as participants as we hope you learn from us. It's very much an exchange of ideas. Does that answer your question?
I think that's a very comprehensive answer. But we've had another question actually just come through as well. It's from a lady called Sonia. Sonia, I hope that the first part that Fiona's answer does cover your question, because she's asked if it's completely online, which it is. And she's also asked at the end of each module, how will I be assessed? So I know we've touched on that with the Reflective Educator. And the other 2 additional modules will be slightly different, isn't it, with the assessments?
Yes, they're you know, we need to practice what we preach. Sometimes the pressure to practice what you preach is a bit overwhelming. You know, I think must role model good practice in terms of our teaching, learning and assessment methods. So we're very keen that, I mean, you'll learn about this on the course, but that any assessment that we design has to align very carefully to what we intend for you to learn. So it's no good for example, to get you doing a 2-hour unseen written exam, when what we want you to do is reflect on your teaching and learning practice. And so that's why for this unit, the assessment modality is an academic blog. For the other units, we'll be doing webinars separately for those, won't we, Lisa?
We are, yes, we will.
You get the detail of the assessment modalities for those if you tune into those webinars.
I was going to say, we also do have a webinar as well, which again I can send through to anybody if you'd like to see the link. But we did do a webinar last month as well, and that was a bit more of a complete course overview, and it went into detail for each of the units. So what I can do, if anybody wants to see that again, I can ensure that that's sent out to you. Again, it's a really good insight session, very informative, and again you'll get to see some of the academic team as well behind the PG certificates. But I think that's it for questions. So I hope everybody's found that extremely informative today. Just to make people aware as well, we are now accepting applications for our September intake. The course is extremely popular, so even though we're not starting until September, if you are interested in joining us and studying with us, then I would absolutely recommend that you work on your application sooner rather than sort of leaving it. I know it's busy, but leaving it to the last minute. If you've got any questions as well in regards to working through your application, or questions regarding, I said, any information with the course, please do let me know. My job is to support you through that, to make sure you've got everything, all the information you need to ensure when you do submit your application, you know, you're feeling confident and comfortable. So you can contact me just via studyonline@manchester.ac.uk, and as I said, I can help talk through any questions which you might have. But it's been great today, Fiona. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
You're welcome. Thanks very much.
We hope you've all enjoyed the event, and as I said, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys.